We're 3 months into the homeschool year, and so I thought this would be a good point to pause and to reflect on the read-alouds that we've done so far, whether we liked them or we didn't. If you're new here, I'm Christina. I'm a homeschooling mom to 5 children. We live in the Canadian Maritimes, and this year my kids are in grades 3, 6, 9, 10, and 12. So we do read aloud together, but as you can tell, there's like a wide age range, from 8 to 17. So I try to find books that everyone can kind of get something from. Sometimes I gear the book more towards the younger kids or more towards the older ones, but I still hope and plan that each child will get something from the book. A lot of our read-alouds go along with the youngest two, their science and their history, with some classics thrown in there and a few fun books. That's just kind of always the way that we've based our read-alouds, and so I'm just continuing along with that. Again, the older kids are still gleaning information and getting things from that. So that said, I have my list here to make sure I don't forget any of the books. I was a little surprised. We've only read 6 books so far. Typically by this point, I'd say at least 8, maybe up to 10 books. So we've definitely slowed down, which is partially intentional. I have spread them out a little bit more. But yeah, we've only read 6 books. So anyways, let's jump right in. The first book that we read this year was Pippi Longstocking. It's by Astrid Lindgren, and it's kind of like a classic book. I thought it would be fun to start with. It's about a little girl, a redheaded girl, who lives in this house. She has a horse who lives on her porch. She has no parents. She has a monkey, and the neighbors are this little boy and girl. It's kind of these crazy adventures that they get into. I don't know. I've seen like different cartoons and movie type stuff. I just didn't get the book. And my kids, they didn't like it either. I was surprised. I thought that they would probably like it, but pretty much everyone ended up giving it 1 star out of 5. Just, it wasn't really for us. So unfortunately, that's disappointing, but it is a book that's considered a classic, and we've read it now, and we know what it is. So then the second book we did was this one here, Mammals of the Small Pond. This is by Phoebe Erickson. It's from the Good and the Beautiful library. It's a level 4. It's a very short little book. It has pictures, and it's about life in a beaver pond, and it goes through each season. I think it started with, which season? It starts with winter, and it goes through autumn, and it just shows kind of the different changes and things that go on. There's a picture in the beginning here of the pond, of what it looks like. So this went along with science, which we're doing for the younger kids. We're doing mammals this year. It was educational, but it wasn't my kids' favorite book. I think, we read it like in 2 days, like super short readings. It wasn't so much a story as what I would call like documentary style, where it kind of just said, this is what's going on. So definitely educational, but the kids weren't huge fans, so we ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars. Then we moved on to this book here, Tribble's Daughter, The Story of Susanna Hutchinson, Indian Captive by Catherine Kirkpatrick. This went along with our Story of the World Volume 3 that, again, the younger 2 kids are doing. This is the story of, let's see, what year was it? 1643, I think. Yeah. Susanna Hutchinson was a real person, and in 1643 she was 9 years old, and she was kidnapped when her family was massacred by the local natives, and she was actually taken and held captive. It gives a little context in the back about the actual documentation, that it differs between whether it was 2, 4, or 6 years that she was held before she was negotiated, her freedom was negotiated. But it's based on historical documents, but it's a made-up story based on that, of what they think happened and some experiences. Definitely very high in the educational value. It gave lots of information about the context of the colonies and the life at that time, both how the natives were living and different challenges that the natives had, as well as the colonists. Interesting in terms of the language, and it actually includes in the back here words like the translation and different words. Let's see, I think it was Algonquin. Lenape words, which is Algonquin, I believe. And it just tells you like what the words mean. So it has a really high educational value. The story was also interesting. Some of my kids liked it more than others. I felt like there were parts where like they kind of skipped over some bits and other things where they spent a long time talking about that they probably didn't need to. But overall, it was a really good book, and we ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. Then the next book, we did another classic that went along with the mammals unit, and that's Black Beauty. And it's by Anna Sewell. Swell? Not sure how you say that. We actually listened to it on audio, so I have a copy of the book, but I didn't actually read this one. We listened to it. It's a story of a horse, and it's basically his life story, like from the time he's young till the time he's, you know, quite old, and the different people, the different masters, the different jobs he did, how he was treated. I think, is there a year? Okay, so the book was written in 1877, or that's when it came out. So it is an older book. The language was a little bit difficult just because it is an older book. Some of it was a bit hard to understand and to follow, but it was a good book. We all enjoyed like the story, and I learned a lot myself, and I know my kids did, about different things about horses, and like it just talks about like working them too hard and the injuries they can have, and different things like feeding them something warm versus you shouldn't feed them something cold when they've been out like working hard. So it has great educational value again. It was interesting, and overall we enjoyed it quite a bit. We gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then we moved on to a book that I thought would be interesting and maybe a little bit different. It's Lost on the Side of a Mountain in Maine. It's by Dawn Fendler. I'm not sure how to say that. Fendler, I think. So we live near the Maine border, and this is the story of a boy. I can't remember how old he was. I think he was 12. And he goes out with his dad and his brother to hike Mount Katahdin, I believe is how you say it. And he gets lost, and he spends almost 2 weeks lost on the side of the mountain. And this is his story. And I knew they were coming out with a movie of it in 2024. And we live, I don't know, maybe three hours away from the place this happened. And so I thought it would be interesting. It ended up being not what we expected. I think when people compare it to like Hatchet and other books like that, I thought it would be more of like kind of in a story form, but it's not. It's written by someone as told by the boy. So this is like a 12-year-old story, and so it's not written in a literature-based way. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but it's very like short, and this is what happened. There's not a lot of detail, and it's just kind of what he can remember. And it was interesting, and some of the things that he experienced were very relatable to where we live in terms of like the bugs and the weather. But it is a story of survival. And yeah, it was interesting, but it was written, I wish there was a whole book written on it. Maybe not so much just the child kind of narrating what he remembered. There were some pictures in it as well, which was interesting to see. And I think there's a map, yeah, of like where he was each day, kind of roughly based on what they figured from his description of what was going on, what he saw. So we ended up giving it 2 stars. I still would really like to see the movie. We've watched the trailer just to see kind of how it differs, because I think the movie is going to be a little bit more full explaining his story. So yeah, 2 stars. I don't know. It would be fun for us to go and see the actual place, maybe one day. That brings us to the last book, which was The Yearling, and it's by Marjorie Keenan Rawlings. This is the story of a young boy in the backwoods of Florida in the 1930s and his experience with everyday life, which included adopting a little baby deer when its mother was killed and raising it. This is considered a classic book. I know it's very popular in like the high school years, but it also went along with what we're learning about for the younger two with mammals. We listened to it on Audible. It was quite long. Let me see. I think it was 12 hours, maybe even a little bit longer. And it was really interesting. I think personally, I got more out of the book than my kids did, although the older one, particularly the oldest, I think he kind of had that more mature view of it, kind of like an adult, that he could see a lot of the themes and the value in it. It really talks about what life is like. You know, you're trying to survive in these wooded areas, swampy areas. The family has to get water from a sinkhole. They don't even have a well. What they wore, what they ate, how they related to their neighbors, things like that. So it was really interesting. It also mentions a little bit about World War I, that the father had served in there, and some of the relationships and stuff he's had since then with fellow people and who he knows. I think it was a good book. It was definitely long, a little bit difficult to follow at times. It took a while to get into the main story, but again, it had a lot of educational value in adding all the background and the context and everything. So we ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. It was a good book. I think I would recommend it. I'm not sure, maybe grade 12. I don't know I'd recommend it any younger than that, honestly. Just my personal opinion on it. So those are the books that we've read so far this year. Let me know in the comments down below if you have read any of these books and what your thoughts were on them. And let me know what you're reading right now or what you've read lately, because I love to get more ideas of books and resources always. Otherwise, I hope this finds you having a great day. Take care.